Welcome back, coders, to another video. Today we're looking at a brand new piece of tech that came in my mail this week. I received the Elgato HD60X, and I'm extremely excited to be talking about it with you because it is replacing a very much needed piece in my streaming setup, which I originally had the HD60, which, if you guys have that, is a very old capture card that only maxes out at 1080p 60, can't pass through anything above 60. So there's some limitations there that I've needed to sort out for a long time. The reason I was so excited to get this card, though, the reason I decided to jump on the HD60X so quickly was a couple of the pieces of tech that are built into this that take it from just an okay capture card, like the HD60 or HD60S or something like that, to an extremely good one, especially for those next-gen console owners out there. That is the ability to pass through up to 4K 60 HDR to my screen, or 1440p 120 hertz to my screen HDR or SDR, and also variable refresh rate support. So VRR support is now supported by this card, and I've got to say, it's really, really valuable, but it is not without flaws. And that's what we're going to go through today. So I've brought you to my desktop just to show you a couple quick settings and tips and tricks that you're going to have to go through in your first setup to make sure that you're ready to use this card with your VRR supported setup, like your Xbox Series X, or maybe your PC supports it, whatever you're going to be doing to use this with VRR, as well as how to get 1440p and 120 hertz to show up as an option to select from your Xbox Series X, so that you can pass through the highest quality footage while you're capturing 1440p 60. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Elgato's site and download the 4K capture utility. This is what you're going to be doing all your backend settings with. And then you're going to be capturing everything through OBS Studio, which is what I'm currently using. So let's go ahead and double click and open this guy. And one thing that I was having that was causing major issues when I first started this process, I'm going to go ahead and mute that just in case, is VRR was causing a lag in the audio. So if you're playing a game that had a variable refresh rate, say Elden Ring is a really good example. That's a game where it runs traditionally in like the 50s, sometimes even down to the 40s. If you're using VRR to smooth that out for yourself, in the pass-through, you were gonna find some issues where audio wasn't going to end up synced in your stream or capture, and that's a big problem. Like, if you're going to be streaming this content, it's just completely unacceptable that when you swing your sword, the sound doesn't come until 2 or 3 seconds later. And this got worse and worse the further you played, because of the fact that it was running at 1 frame rate, but the capture was at 60 FPS. So slowly over time, the desync would become worse and worse and worse, and it would become unusable footage unless you were using it just for video. So there's a couple things in here that I just want to showcase that help fix this. The first one is updating the firmware, which isn't expressly shown anywhere in the app. What you have to do is you got to hold down the control key on your keyboard and then come up to this right hand side where it says open preferences. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to go over to the software version, not the software version, we're going to go to the device tab, I'm sorry. You're going to make sure that your capture device is selected as the GameKO HD60X. And you're going to look at this firmware version and you're going to click the update firmware. Now, I'm already up to date, so I'm not going to go through this process. Normally, it would tell you what the new firmware is available. I guarantee you, if you just got it out of the box, it needs a firmware update. They may say that they would do say, though, if you're operating and you're not experiencing these issues, then go ahead and don't do the firmware update. I say ignore that. I think that it's worthwhile to stay on the latest firmware. You never know what could be possibly included in those firmware updates that also may improve things. The other aspect that you'll find, and real quick, we're just going to X out. I'm just going to show you the back end of my Xbox Series X. The other aspect that you'll find, and I'll full screen this for you guys, this is a nice, easy way. There's almost no lag on this also, which is a really, really cool feature here as well, is the display and refresh rate options. This was not displaying as an option for 1440p, even though my monitor and the pass-through supported it on the card. And I wasn't able to select 1440p from the menu. Since Xbox Series X I know does support it, and that's how I had my setup before, I wasn't able to access 120 hertz at that. It was only 1080p at 120 hertz, which was not acceptable in my opinion. So what I went ahead and did is after that firmware setup, I had to change a couple other settings as well in order to get this to work effectively. So we're going to go back in here and click on this open preference option. You don't have to hold the control button anymore, but if you couldn't hold the control button, don't hold the control button, this update firmware option does not show up. We're going to have to go into this device setting tab again, and we're going to come down to the input EDID mode to display. This is required in order for this to communicate correctly with your television or your monitor to make sure that it's getting the right information so it knows what signal to send. So this allowed me, once I did that, once I unplugged the device, plugged it back into the USB, had a little restart with the device itself, it went ahead and showed right away. I was able to select 1440p at 120 hertz, and that allows me to visually play at 120 hertz while capturing at 1440p 60, which is super, super valuable. And I think is great because one of the biggest challenges with capture cards in the past is that I was always degrading my experience because either the capture card didn't support a certain resolution pass through or didn't support a certain refresh rate pass through, or both. And this allows you to do the best of both worlds. The only thing it doesn't do, and that's because there aren't any capture cards on the market that have this, is it doesn't do HDMI 2.1, which means no 4K 120 hertz. 4K 60, sure. 4K 120, no. 4K 60 HDR, I think is also not supported. So there's a couple limitations there, but honestly, besides that, you can sit at 1440p at 120 hertz with HDR and capture 1440p 60 HDR or SDR because it will automatically tone map it if you'd like it as well. So there's just so many options within this card that are really, really valuable, and the capture quality is just much, much better than it's been in the past. And now there's no more audio lag when we're doing this. So it's a really good thing that we're seeing. And I'm very happy with the purchase. Highly recommend you get the HD60X if you have an next-gen console. If you have something where you're doing a dual monitor setup and you want to be able to use VRR and high frame rates, because it does go up to 120 FPS, which means that you're no longer limited to that 60 FPS pass through that other monitor. I know that some other capture cards do support this in their lineup, but none of them support VRR alongside that, which is great because almost nothing locks to 120 hertz unless you're on a 3080, 3090, and even then, lots of games don't. So hopefully this was a helpful video. Hopefully it will help you guys when you're getting your HD60X set up and you won't have the issues that I ran into. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you found this helpful, and if you want to see more content like this, or if you just like watching really awesome gameplay from different games with two of your favorite guys here at GameKO. Make sure, thank you, and as always, stay classy, coders.